White people are suffering from white supremacy too. I had a conversation with a client the other day who is a professor. They teach about white supremacy, African American rhetoric, and XYZ, and different concepts in the diaspora. And we were talking about how white people also are affected and are suffering from white supremacy as well, in the way that my phone overheated, but in the way that white people have no connection to their own culture or any culture whatsoever other than whiteness, white American culture. So an example of this would be that my friend and client who asked his class, how many of you participate in mutual aid? Nobody raised their hand. None of the white people raised their hand. He goes, okay, let me rephrase that, and says, how many of you have gone to a friend's house and their parents cooked for you? And then everyone raised their hand. And he goes, right, this is mutual aid. The way that white people have had to come up with a word for community, aka mutual aid, shows that they are suffering from white supremacy as well. While they think they're benefiting, you're actually not allowed to participate in things that would be beneficial to you because of white supremacy. And it's made to seem like Black and brown people are the only people who participate in these things or who would benefit from these things. We, as POC people, we've always known and always participated in mutual aid or community because that's how we thrive. And we are not just self-focused, we're community-focused, community-oriented. And so the things we do are not just for ourselves, they're to benefit our community, because that's how it's always been in our cultures. And while white people for so long have tried to strip us of our culture, we still have roots that tie us to our ancestors and our culture and these different practices that have been around long before we've ever existed. And if white supremacy didn't exist or wasn't so prevalent, white people would be allowed to connect to their culture as well. But they've been so brainwashed into believing that having culture or allowing Black and brown people to participate in their culture is a threat to them. And that when we engage in culture, it's part of our culture to be violent or oppressive. But really, that's white supremacy culture. That's what y'all created. It's not in our culture to overtake others and be violent unnecessarily and hateful and oppressive. That's just not in us. Our cultures are uplifting and bring community together. We dance, we sing, we create, we craft, we tell stories. That's our culture, and that's many of y'all's culture. But you refuse to see, white people refuse to see it that way. And so really, white people are keeping themselves in this vicious cycle of disconnection, of violence, and then want to be like, well, slavery was 300 years ago, like, why don't you just forget about it? No, like, you're still keeping that shit going, and it's actually having negative impacts on white people as well.
There's something so tragic about white America that if we could just do this one thing, I think the rest of our problems would disappear. Because our issue before racism, before white supremacy, is that we don't listen. We don't listen to people of color. We don't listen to their stories. We don't listen to their lived experiences. Because if we did, we would never have believed a word that came out of Donald Trump's mouth. Because we would have known that he was lying all along. At the root of white supremacy is pride. We don't need to listen. You can't teach me anything. But you know what comes before the fall? Pride comes before the fall. And we're about to find out what happens when you shut out the prophetic voice and you don't listen or pay attention to the warning signs. They told us that Trump didn't care about us and our cost of living. They told us that he only cares about himself. But we didn't listen, and now we're finding out the hard way.
We talk about how ironic it is that the right demonizes people of color when the only time I feared for my life has been around a white man. I get so many hate comments like these few here of the time I just write it off as immature, angry men, but the times that I've genuinely been scared that violence was going to be inflicted upon me have been white men. Not to mention that a lot of domestic violence, as well as many mass shootings, are committed by white men. There are going to be people in any demographic that commit crimes, but the fact that the right focuses so intensely on the single crime that a person of color commits is so dishonest. Some of the craziest things that have happened to me since I started posting is that I've gotten my account banned because white supremacists mass reported me for being underage, which I'm clearly not. They found my phone number and leaked it, so I had to change my phone number. They tried to get me fired by contacting any school in Chicago to see if I worked there. There was even an online page to see who was calling which school. I've literally been called a race traitor and told that I will be lynched along with POC. So no, people of color aren't the problem here. It is white men, and that's why I make the content I do. They prove it to me more and more every single day why it's necessary.
You know, I'll never forget the day a white buddy of mine said black people don't deserve equality because they could never get enough. And that's true. White people are actually scared of equality. That's just how racist we are as a people. And it's not just that one person. White culture in general. Probably I would say most white people, when they hear the word equality, they fear that white people will be oppressed because brown, black, and indigenous people might actually get what's fair and just. That's just how racist we are. And we're so obsessed with the idea of not having equality in America for black, brown, and indigenous people that we don't have health care, that we don't have economic equality. We don't have reasonable gun laws. Our liberties are being stripped because we have a fascist, racist, white supremacist regime in office because we are so scared of equality. We're so scared that black and brown folks might become the majority one day. That we had a black president, and now we've got to have a white supremacist president. That's how scared we are of equality. That's how racist we are as a people. Go to the fucking root. The root of America's problems. The root of the white man and the white woman, their problems, and America and the world. If you think about it, colonialization, white supremacy, the mentality of white people today, not just yesterday, today, right now, the denial, racially, the silence, the apathy, the continuous gaslighting, all that fucking shit. That's ruined us. It's ruined white people, and it's ruining our nation. And whose fault is it? White people's fault. Their inability to fucking fix their goddamn problem. Until we fix white supremacy, everything we try will fail. It's dysfunctional and it's toxic, and Trump and this regime is the perfect proof of all that shit. How we got in this fucking mess? White people's bullshit. White people's racist fucking bullshit. Period.
White supremacy hurts white people too. They just don't realize it. Dead ass, you'd be making more money, you'd have better schools, you'd have better health outcomes, you'd live longer lives if it weren't for white supremacy. There's this false belief that people of color making progress comes at a material cost for white people. It's called the zero-sum paradigm. And the wealthy elite have used this for years to convince white people, especially here in the South, to vote against their own interests. The wealthy elite have used this to convince everyone that we should expect less from government and not more. And that's allowed corporations to grow and make money hand over fist, while the average person working full-time can't keep up with the cost of living. Investment in the public infrastructure like healthcare and social safety nets benefits all of us, especially here in the South. But there's been a concerted effort for years politically to convince white people that these type of investments would only benefit minorities and that it would cost white people something to do it. And so white people are dying. There's this book called Dying of Whiteness that speaks directly to the impact that politics, messaging, and white supremacy has had on the health and well-being of other white people. We're all in this together, whether you want to be or not. There used to be a time where white folks not just expected, but demanded the government make more investments into their well-being. That's how we got a lot of the programs we saw through the 30s through the 60s that helped build the white middle class. White supremacy is just a tool for the greedy, and white folks have allowed the wealthy elite to convince them to turn on their neighbors, on their co-workers, on other members of the community. These wealthy elite have convinced them to accept lower wages, unsafe working conditions, no health care, no job security. The elite have offered working class white people a psychological wage of racial superiority, all the while they strip them of health care, they underfund their children's schools, and they suppress their wages. Dismantling white supremacy would not be a charity to communities of color. It is foundational to your own economic survival, white people, and to the health and well-being of white Americans all over the country, especially here in the South.
Claire says everything is white supremacy to you. White women cannot handle this reality. Yes, it is. We live in a settler colonialist white supremacist system. So it should not surprise you that the ways that white people have an advantage and seek to oppress and control and exploit people of color comes back to white supremacy. And that's really uncomfortable for us as white women to hear, because we want to push to the forefront our marginalization under a patriarchal system, failing to understand that that system is threefold: patriarchy, capitalism, white supremacy, and how at the end of the day we will prioritize our whiteness and the advantage that that gives us over solidarity with women of color. This is what Rebecca's been trying to educate y'all on. If we as white women truly want to see an end to the patriarchy, if we as leftists and environmentalists truly want to protect vulnerable people in the planet and bring down capitalism, we cannot do those things without examining how our white supremacy sabotages those other efforts and start deconstructing.
After watching all those clips, one thing that stood out immediately in this conversation is bigger than race alone. It's really a conversation about identity, community, history, power, and how people understand the world around. Throughout the video, several speakers argued that white supremacy doesn't just harm people of color, but it also harms whites themselves. They talk about culture, community, economics, healthcare, politics, education, and even the way people see themselves and relate to one another. Now, whether I agree with those arguments completely, partially, or not at all, is asking why these conversations continue to gain attention. Clearly, there are some people who believe that many Americans' foreign problems can never be understood without talking about race and history. At the same time, there are others who believe that focusing heavily on race creates more division than solving the problem, and that is where a lot of tension comes from. One thing I found interesting is that several speakers weren't just talking about discriminations against Black people. They were making a broader argument that certain social systems affects everybody. That's a much larger claim than simply saying one group is disadvantaged and the other is privileged. It's an argument about how society is structured and whether those structures ultimately helps or hurts the people. Another theme that appeared throughout this video was community. Several speakers argued that strong communities are built on cooperation, shared responsibilities, and mutual support. Others suggest that modern society has become increasingly isolated and individualistic. Whether I agree with that or not, it's hard to deny that many people today feel disconnected from one another. People are spending more time online. People are increasingly divided politically. People often live next to each other without really knowing each other. And many communities across the world are struggling with loneliness, distrust, and social fragmentation. That raises an important question. What actually creates a healthy community? Is it shared values, shared experience, shared history, shared culture, or simply a willingness to care about the people around you? Those are questions worth thinking about. Another thing that stood out was how differently people interpret the same event. One person may see a social problem and immediately connect to it, and others are forced to feel for their neighbor. Another person may see the exact same problem and focus on individual responsibility. Both perspectives exist throughout America today. What concerns me the most is many people seem to be losing the ability to have these conversations without immediately assuming the worst about one another. Social media rewards outrage. Algorithms reward conflict. The loudest voices often get the most attention, but real understanding usually happens through listening, not shouting, and that is And that doesn't mean argument. Listening to someone does not mean surrendering to their belief. It simply means being willing to understand why another person thinks the way they think. At the end of the day, America is changing. The country is becoming more diverse. New generations are bringing a new perspective. Technology is changing how people communicate, and many of the conversations that were once avoided are now happening in public every day. The question is not whether these conversations will continue. They're real. The question is whether people will approach them with curiosity and hostility, whether they will try to understand or not. And what do you think about conversations like this that bring people? Do conversations like this bring people together or push people away? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this reaction and want more like this, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Turn on the notification so that you will be the first to get updated each time we post. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.